And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon where you're joining us from around the globe. This is Robert Leak, Director of Marketing here at Axion eFolder, and I would like to welcome everyone to today's webcast, focusing on the fast track to partner success and leveraging the right tools to enhance your MSP business. I've got a lot of exciting content today. We're going to be sitting down with one of our longtime partners and really getting into the business of really making customers happy and being able to drive retention and business and really being able to set up your MSP for success through a few different really key philosophies and then maybe some Axion eFolder solutions as well. Before we get too far down the road, I want to go through just a few housekeeping items. Today's content's going to run for about 45 minutes to an hour or so. But we're definitely going to be taking question and answer throughout and then have a little bit of time at the end. But if you do have any thoughts that come up about what you're hearing or any questions for Bernard, just pop them in and we'll address them as seamlessly as we can. We'll be also sending out a follow-up email around today's webcast that'll have links for the recording, content that we're going through, and then an exciting link that we'll be talking about here in just a little while. You'll also be able to find recordings of this on YouTube, and along with some of our other webcasts that we do here at Axion eFolder, including our MSP Ignition series. That is a whole series of webcasts that I host with our Vice President of Best Practices, Tom Watson, focused on the MSP realm, both from how, kind of the daily side of running the business, the tools that help make you a little bit more efficient, and then subsequently a sales enablement side as well. So if you haven't caught us on MSP Ignition, I encourage you to go check it out because there's a lot of great info out there. But for today, we are going to be doing, really talk about evolving and, really using a little bit of fun term there, but, evolving is really a basic that we have to deal with constantly in technology. It's been something that's happening, throughout probably the instance of the first computer, certainly to where we're today, and it really impacts the MSP world as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about what really makes success with clients and really what are the core functions to focus on and really get good at. And then subsequently, how does data protection fit into all of this and making sure that you're not only, meeting your customer demands, but doing so in a way that keeps your brand front in mind. And then lastly, we have a unique opportunity from us here at Axion eFolder, and we'll talk about that at the very end. I'd like to introduce those who are with us and who were planning to be with us. So first off, Bernard Facchina is president of Patina Strategic Planning based out of Annapolis, Maryland. Bernard, how are you doing today, sir?
Good. How you doing, Robert?
Doing great. It's wonderful being on the phone with you today. We were supposed to have Sam McIntyre with us. Sam is really the key to our relationship with Bernard and Facchina and Facchina Strategic Planning as a whole. Sam couldn't join us today. I got a fun email from him first thing this morning, said that he got a little bit of a bout of the ick. I won't get into too many grimy details, but let's just say it's good that he's not with us. I was lucky enough to meet Bernard with Sam at an SMB Forum event. So shout out to the SMB Nation folks and some of the great events that they put on. And Bernard and I started talking and, really started going down the road of really the MSP business and started talking about how he was doing things and how our solutions fit in. And it really seemed like a great story that we wanted to share a little bit more broadly. And that's what's brought us through to today. So Bernard, thank you again. And we'll get back to you in just 1 minute as I want to make sure that our audience has a chance to really understand who you are and kind of what makes this so impactful from your perspective. But before that, I would like to kind of roll everyone through just a quick overview of who we are here at Axion eFolder. We have been evolving, we talked about that a moment ago, a lot since our inception, almost a decade and a half ago. We started up with a backup for file solution, that graphic that you see in the bottom right part of your screen, and that's the solution that eFolder was built upon. Great for file level backup, SQL databases, but we knew that the world was evolving both within our business walls and how we were doing business outside those walls. And the leadership team saw this evolution as an opportunity to become more around what MSPs need for data protection. So we started investing in other solutions, and that really started with Anchor, File Sync and Share, and it's so much more than File Sync and Share because, there's a lot of security features, and a lot of things that you can do around really staying front of mind with your clients. We'll talk about that actually a little bit here today and more in depth. We also have Cloud Finder, which is an Office 365 backup solution at the cloud-to-cloud level. Microsoft only has certain retention rules, and if you have really stringent compliance needs, or really just clients that maybe make life a little bit more difficult as it relates to managing their email, their calendar, their contacts, their SharePoint, this is a solution that backs that up and makes your world a little bit smoother. Lastly, what's quickly becoming our flagship suite of solutions is our business continuity. And we have two really strong solutions here. Replabit is a BDR that focuses on-site. It has some cloud pieces as well. We're going to dive into that pretty deeply here. It's one of the things that Bernard is using at Facchina today. And then we also just most recently brought in Accient from our acquisition this past July, almost actually a year ago this month. We invested in a company that really has a very strong disaster recovery as a solution offering, that if you have clients where minutes mean dollars, this is something that you should really think about. It has a multifaceted way of backing up all different types of files, server, etc., and has a virtual office component that if you really have a disaster recovery and have people needing to do business in the cloud, it's an excellent fit. But today we're going to focus on Anchor and Replabit, but most importantly, we're going to focus on the evolution of the IT space. And as you can see here in this graphic, we've seen a lot of changes over the last 5 or 6 decades or so, thinking about in the infancy of what technology was back in the 60s and 70s, moving into, very much a hardware world in the 80s being managed by folks like Bernard, and we'll talk about when he started his business, what the world was like. And then as we progress through the 90s and into this next millennium, the world is just different. And the way that you manage your clients is going to be a little differently as well. And as the IT world has evolved from hardware to software to managing these services, becoming an MSP is a little different as well, because not only do you have to really consider yourself an expert in hardware and software, but you have to consider yourself an expert in the business needs. And so that's where the consulting and managed services world really come together, and that's what makes Bernard's story so interesting. So Bernard, we're going to turn it over to you. For a few minutes. Maybe you could just give us a bit of a background on Facchina strategic planning, how you started, how you came to be, and really kind of what's evolved in your world as we sit here in 2018.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate that. Well, thanks everybody for joining. You couldn't be listening to a greater company. I'm really excited about the products that I use. My company started in 1987, and as many of you know, looking at the IT world, we've gone from an environment back in the 60s and 70s where everything was a mainframe, everything was driven by mainframe, to decentralization back out to PCs. And then now we're seeing this push back to centralization, which is done via the cloud, where a lot of these corporations are driving cloud services products and things like that. But back in '87, my theory was that many companies needed someone, small and mid-sized companies, even some large companies, needed somebody to stand in and help them with the front end to the back end process of running their business. And here's what I mean. They needed somebody to come in and spec install and support their marketing systems, maybe give them some business consulting, and then on the back end side, helping with their marketing and their promotion to drive business down their funnel. And so my company, when I was getting started, I noticed that a lot of these small and mid-sized companies were engaging 2 and 3 subcontractors to do that. So you would have an accounting kind of business consultant kind of guy running with you and looking at your numbers. You may have an IT group managing your infrastructure. You hired an ad agency to do your marketing and that type of thing. And I thought that there was a really good niche for somebody to come in and say, hey, listen, you're running a small or medium-sized business. Your resources are very limited. Your time is very limited. You'd rather deal with one player that can stand in there and help you grow and manage your business. So I got into more of a multi-layered business approach, and I focused on the strategic side of executing someone's business process. And what I found is when you focus on the strategy and looking at how these people are trying to grow their business, then you put yourself in a position to make recommendations that very, very easily dovetail with what they're trying to do. I know we have a lot of people here on the call, and you're going to probably recognize what I'm about to say, in that lots of times when we do IT, and you go into these companies, and whether you're doing managed services or you're just doing break and fix, you find that as these companies grow, the people that you're reporting to start to ask you more strategic questions. Hey, my sales force is increasing. I need to change how my phones work. My accounting department has grown by so many people. I need to share files differently now. Our company has expanded. We used to have one server. Now we have 2 and 3 servers. We need to talk about disaster recovery. So what I found was a lot of the IT people were getting caught where they were getting asked strategic questions and not questions about their area of expertise. And they would push back and say, hey, listen, I'm here just fixing your stuff and making your network run. You're asking me how to grow your business. Well, I'm here to tell you that some of you, if you're dealing in the small and mid-sized market, you need to embrace that, because that's a great opportunity for you to help your customers with your solutions that are a heck of a lot easier to sell and make a lot more sense when you look at it in the strategic framework from helping your company grow their business. So that's kind of where we are. You want to kick on to? Yeah.
Well, actually, Bernard, I would like to focus a little bit on that, because I think the key is that you were doing, I mean, we've heard the term, virtual CIO, I think kind of been popular, at least for a few years, if not a little bit more. But it sounds like you were a little bit of ahead of the game on this as it relates to working with small to medium-sized businesses, seeing that they were going to have they had a need for infrastructure in that kind of immediate moment that you started working with them. But you had the foresight to understand that they wanted to grow, that they needed to grow, and that was going to, maybe have some impacts on their business infrastructure. What was that like as it relates to kind of being that consultant? Was that something foreign to them, or was that something that they were just willing to and happy to have a partner that wanted to work with them in that fashion?
That's a great question. I saw 2 things happen there. First, with the small and mid-sized companies, many of these people didn't have an IT company or a business consultant, so to speak. So they were very eager to embrace somebody that could come in and kind of make the pieces all fit and give them some advice. But what I found happened is I got referrals and things like that. I started being called in alongside of other IT companies. We're going into large corporations that had a big IT department. And they said, you know what, almost like an accounting audit, we'd like this guy to come in from the outside, work with our team, take a look at how we do what we do, and see if there's some suggestions that he can make for our IT team to maybe do things better or more efficiently with how we run our business.
Excellent. That's great. And as we think about, those consulting and the strategy behind, whether it's the way they run their business, the infrastructure that supports it, things can get pretty complicated, right? I mean, in the IT channel, we live in a world of, hardware and many facets, both at the end user, the infrastructure, servers, telephones, now we're dealing with, people bringing their own devices, things of that nature. There's also a software component where, I'm not even talking about the software that they use on a daily basis, but then the security softwares, everything that really supports keeping, those intangibles a little bit more safer. BG, what was your perspective on, kind of the successes of managing clients' needs? Was it complicated, or have you been able to kind of boil that down to a few points?
Yeah, here's how I look at things. There's a couple things that I've noticed in the last 4 or 5 years. First off, I would say that everybody was excited about what I call the shiny new coin. And if you look at the leaders in the field, the Googles, the Microsoft, they're always waving a shiny new coin in front of somebody, trying to get that wow effect. And what I've noticed is, certainly in the cell phone market, the wow effect has kind of gone away. People are starting to realize that, hey, that new phone that's costing you just $20 a month to add onto your plan over 3 years, that costs you a lot of money, and people aren't willing to do that. But what I decided to do was to say, hey, what are the basic things that these people are trying to do? And I found that it really centers around a couple of things: word processing, financial management, whether it be through Excel or some other proprietary package, and email and file share. And so if most of these companies have that, I mean, they may have a proprietary package if you're, in healthcare or something like that, but lots of times it's word processing, spreadsheets, and email. And if you get that stuff going, that's pretty much how most of these businesses run. So I find that now what I'm trying to do with my clients, honestly, is dumb some of this stuff down. my clients always express to me, there's just too many choices. I mean, there's just choices for everything, whether it's buying a computer, monitors, phones, tablets, you name it, and they're kind of overwhelmed. And when I sit behind closed doors with these people, they'll just say, "Hey, listen, I'm just trying to run a 100-person landscape company, or I'm just trying to run a 250-person accounting firm." And I don't. What's the simplest way to do this kind of stuff? Because more moving parts is more things that can break.
And that makes a lot of sense. And you keep mentioning, you work with, businesses of certain sizes of people. And when it comes down to it, those people are working and doing, those basic functions around the word processing, around managing the finances, and of course the email and all the fun that comes along with it. I just think it's a very interesting perspective that you try to make this as simple as possible. And I assume that when we think about simplicity, it's not only what you're trying to do with your clients, but the vendors that you're working with and the products that you're implementing for your clients' benefit.
Exactly. And let me just throw this in there, that lots of times what happens is people, I think IT people need to become a little bit more process focused, because the truth is there's a lot of great ideas, super ideas, but they don't necessarily have value for every company. Just because it's a great idea doesn't mean that I need to use it. So that's where you get the blowback from the customers. And if you're in the IT business, sometimes, I know people will look down their nose at you and they'll wonder, hey, are you just trying to sell me something, or do I really need this? And that's why
Right.
If you approach the thing from the strategic standpoint of, hey, this is how an idea makes sense with how you're trying to grow your business, then the technology that you're throwing on top of it makes it a lot more palatable for the customer to understand and accept.
Okay, fair enough. And one of the things that I see is as very, kind of a golden thread, as I like to call it, going through, the word processing, the finances, the email, and mostly how people do business. I see very much a focus on files. And we talk about files in a lot of different ways, but the key is the fact that people work from files. And Bernard, you've got a pretty interesting perspective on the history of the way that people work with files and some of the challenges that have been evolving throughout, the last few decades. Would you mind walking us through a little bit of that?
Sure. Unfortunately, I go back far enough to remember floppy disks and all that kind of stuff. So people are using products, and we were carrying stuff around in our briefcase, and we were hoping that the floppy disk didn't, booted and we could see the data. Then it kind of moved into the file server arena, and then when people wanted that remote connectivity, they were saying, hey, what am I going to do with a VPN? Am I using a VPN? Am I going to use FTP? How's that going to work? Along comes email. Hey, I can send it through email, but lo and behold, for those of us that are old enough to remember, email used to have tremendous restrictions on file size for file attachments, so that had its own limitations. So everybody said, hey, let's go into SharePoint. Why don't we do that? Let's build a SharePoint site, and let's get into CMS managed data and throw all of our stuff into SharePoint and try to use it. And guess what? I'm trying to share something with a client, and oh my God, that's extremely difficult to do in SharePoint if you're not a SharePoint wizard. So all these things kind of set the stage, so to speak, for a great product like Anchor. And that file sync process just was something that when I saw it, there's very few. I look at a lot of technology. I look at a lot of hardware. I look at a lot of software. And what I particularly liked about the file sync product was this is something that to me made sense, because I go back to the strategic side of this. Customers don't want to learn new stuff. They just don't. If you have a small law firm that you consult with, these guys are trying to build cases. They're trying to go to court. They're not thinking about sharing that briefing. They're not thinking about uploading all those papers for that divorce into a folder and sharing it with their client. They're not trying to think of the technology behind that. They just want it to happen. So that's why the file sync and the file sharing side of what I saw in eFolder was particularly exciting to me.
Well, and Bernard, thank you for that. I mean, the glowing words especially, but really setting the stage for the fact that it comes back to the tools to make an MSP successful and the tools to make your client successful. And while we've kind of seen this evolution of file sync and share over time, and how people have been doing this for many years before, many decades before we had a solution called file sync and share, we've been trying to work our way up to this. But even as we've gotten to this place of file sync, today's world, there's a lot of options out there, but there's also a lot of pain that comes along with file sync and share. And you can see that from our perspective, this really kind of hits 5 different arenas, and really the basis of it is kind of barriers to data, and that's really kind of epitomized by that file server that Bernard was just speaking of, because it's all about access. And if you've got the file server on location, you've got all your employees in one location, then that's great. But many of the folks and the businesses that work today, the challenges are becoming much more than just something that can be solved by an on-site file server. And I know that the folks on this call is familiar with that, and they've been able to then evolve into maybe what else could work there, and that's those sharing obstacles. Well, the file server is there on site. How can we get our remote folks to get into there? Because when you have people traveling, when you have people doing business on the road, it becomes a costly problem. And then also because you need more file servers, but then how do you get to that data when you're remote? Then came VPN and FTP. I've worked in the VPN world. I remember a couple of decades ago when I was with one of the telecom giants, that was our method of working remotely, was VPNs. And sometimes it was okay. Sometimes it was a pain in the tuskus, if you know what I mean, because it wasn't working right, your tunneling wasn't validating. It was just something that I know at firsthand. Employees just love to deal with those VPNs. So sharing obstacles were certainly a way that, getting access to the data and sharing what you needed. But then once we kind of worked our way around the VPN world, we could just start sharing an email, things of that nature. But that created a pretty big issue on data sprawl. And data sprawl, when you think about it firsthand, might not seem like that big of an issue. But the fact of the matter is that it becomes kind of a pain. Bernard, you mentioned a moment ago that, I think even today there's still some file limits on what you can share in email. There's security issues about who you're sharing with or who are you forwarding this on to when it comes down to it. It also causes issue for the MSPs to worry about as it relates to storage bloat on the network, and how much memory and how much availability do you really need to count for not only your emails but everything else supporting those emails. Also, as it relates to data sprawl, you start concerning yourself with duplication, versioning issues. Are you working off the same thing? Your clients are having these types of challenges on a daily basis. On top of the fact that they have compliance issues, there's not a lot of audit availabilities as people start sharing things with email. But we'll come back to that in a moment. Bernard's going to walk everyone through. I want to hit these last 2 points real quickly, because as we think about the administrative limitations, this is especially, as an IT service provider, managing your client's data is very key. And what we see in a lot of CMSs, and then it kind of overlays into some of the more consumer grade issues on the file sync side, is that you just don't have a way to manage from that single pane of glass. You don't have a way to understand the separations of environments between one client to the next. It's just not an easy way for an IT provider to manage data on their client's behalf. And then we start thinking about the security world. Obviously, once you start dealing with file syncing in ways that are unsecure, you have the potential for loss of data, you have the potential for theft of data, and then God forbid you have a client get hit by a ransomware attack, because that's a whole nother issue. But the thing is that we've got a solution in Anchor that is indeed file sync, and as I mentioned when I kicked this call off, so much more. And Bernard, would you mind walking us through kind of, as you see the components of Anchor fitting these pieces, and how you've seen them impact not only your business but the way that you do business with your clients?
Sure. I tell you what's most interesting. When I first found Anchor and I started to look at it, I think as an IT person, obviously you're looking at reliability. I'm not going to recommend a product if I don't have the confidence that the dang thing works, and Anchor works. And so when I decided to demo that a long time ago, I said, hey, let's just mess around with this thing and let's see if it really does what it says it's going to do. But interestingly enough, I come back to my driving point today that IT people need to be strategic thinkers. And one of the things that I noticed is that this product is brandable, and a lot of people gloss over that. I think it's huge. If you look at what the large technology companies are doing today, they are basically very creatively having people pay for the right to promote them. So you pay for the right to promote OneDrive, and you have Google Docs and all these other things where there's a whole nest of issues there with scanning your files and getting metadata and doing all that kind of stuff to analyze what you're doing with your documents. But when it came to Anchor, when I found out that, hey, this is part of my marketing approach with my clients, where I can go in and say, not only is Anchor a file sharing tool, but it's a branding tool. Because lots of times these companies, these small and mid-sized companies, are not always the best marketers. So what they're trying to do is I'm going to them and saying, wouldn't it be great that every time you tried to share something with your customer, you're promoting your company? You're not promoting OneDrive. And all of a sudden their ears perked up and they said, hey, tell me about that. Hey, how about employee internal relations, where instead of sending employees to some weird site that you built, it goes to a file sharing folder that when they click on it, it shows your logo with your company and your message. And that builds team motivation and things like that. So that worked out very well. The second part of that is a lot of these small and mid-sized companies, they're catching on to what's going on. And believe it or not, with these smaller companies, they're coming and they're saying, hey, do I even need a file server anymore? Why do I really need that? I've got several or numerous clients now that are small, mid-sized companies that are now saying, hey, I can use Anchor for my file sharing, and then I can focus on my Microsoft suite on my workstations, and life's good. I got 10 employees, I got 20 employees, it works great. We'll sync our files. We have our bookkeeping on 1 or 2 machines that we need, and we're done. We don't even have a file server, and it works out great. The second part of that is, like I say, is that the reliability of the product, and the sync works great. It's fast. It works across all devices very seamlessly, and it just takes minutes to set up. So there's no blowback from my customers, because once you turn this product over to your customer, anybody that's on this call, and they say, hey, this sounds all great, but at some point, the IT guy that I'm dealing with inside of this 50-person company or whatever, they're going to want to know how to do what I do, and they're going to take over the management of Anchor. It's very, very easy to use. It's very simple to use. I can tell you that the comments that I get back from my clients, we have lawyers and all different kinds of people that we deal with. Once again, they're trying to focus on their trade, not become an IT guy. They say, hey, I never realized it was so easy to share something with a customer. And by the way, you mean to tell me that I get reports and I can know when they've uploaded or downloaded something, or I can see activity on those folders so I know exactly what they're doing? That's fantastic. And by the way, if someone forgets a password, they're not calling and screaming at the customer, hey, I can't remember how to get to my files for my case. The system manages the passwords for you. So it's a very, very nice and well thought out way to handle file sync and file share. And I've just been tickled pink with it. It's just, I've looked at a lot of stuff. I did a lot of SharePoint design and development and file sharing, extremely cumbersome. A lot of work to it. If you're not a SharePoint guy, you're going to have problems going forward. But the nice thing with Anchor, you set it up. Once you set it up, it kind of runs itself.
Awesome. And we've got a question that's just come in from John, and wanted to put it out. It says, map and a drive letter would really make things a lot simpler for end users. When will Anchor have this functionality worked out so that it works right all the time? John, I appreciate that question, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that back to our product team. I don't have a timeline for you on that right now, but we'll make sure we get that back to you, some feedback here in the next couple of days. So sorry I don't have that. Again, being the director of marketing, that's know just enough to get myself in trouble most of the time, but on that roadmap stuff, we'll get back to you. And Bernard, thank you again for some of those perspectives as far as dealing with your clients with Anchor and the value that it brings. And I'll say again, as someone who had been working in a myriad of file sync or file sharing solutions, from Dropbox to Google to even SharePoint for that matter, it never seems to be something that was easy. And when I first started working here at Axient and eFolder, once I saw the Anchor solution, I was hooked. And to be quite honest with you, it amazes me every day what the tool can do. We talk about the limitations on email sharing. As Bernard and I were actually going back and forth on this deck that we're looking at, the file got a little too large, and I actually was able to very easily send him a link that he was to download and really make it, that collaboration very easily. And I'll say so much as well that, Bernard mentioned the branding piece of this. I hear a lot that MSPs are becoming so efficient in the way that they're managing the IT for their clients. Their clients almost forget that they're managing their IT for them. It's very seamless. Everything is smooth. Things are running well. There's a lot of notifications when challenges come up, and people are on top of it before there's an issue ever known at the client. So that brandable piece of Anchor is a really key aspect, that we can put your logo on the web portals, on the desktop agents, and even we have a mobile app for Android and iOS that comes with just a standard tile, but once your users click the tile, you actually get a branded splash screen on the back end of that. So it keeps, again, your brand front and center, so they know that, hey, my life is a little bit easier thanks to, in this case, Facchina strategic planning. So it's something that I don't think is it can be oversold. And subsequently, as it relates to a productivity tool, I mentioned that, we've talked about email sharing and the things that come along with that, but we also have a tool called Collaborative Web Editor that will actually allow multiple users, not just one or two or three, but multiple users from literally around the globe to go in and manage Word documents, PowerPoint presentations, Excel spreadsheets, all in a fashion that where you can see and track who's managing them, but also in a fashion that keeps the content and data secure. It never leaves the infrastructure of Anchor and can be managed in that way. Again, it gives you that trail that if you have compliance needs, audit needs, really fits a lot of different points. But that's, again, on the very much the user side. But at the same time, we know that, the tools that make an MSP successful aren't just simply file sync and share or any of the other things out there, but the ability to recover data and hopefully do so in a fashion that helps you sleep a little bit easier at night. So right now we're going to talk a little bit about BDR. And as we think about
one thing in there, Robert.
Let me
throw one thing in there before we jump over on that. There's a couple other things your listeners need to understand. Not only do you get the logo, but you can also get custom messages, disclaimers, and things like that are important. And it's interesting. I know some of you that are listening or hear me talk about this marketing component of that, but it's interesting. If you go to a company and you talk about how they're building their business and how they're getting their customers, they talk about their website, they talk about their direct mail campaigns, they talk about their signature and their email, and they say, hey, how many views do I get? Let's go look at our Google Analytics on our website, see how many hits we got today. And I go into their companies and I say, listen, you got hundreds of customers and vendors that you're dealing with. How wouldn't it be, the value to have those customers and vendors hit a unified message and see your logo every day instead of OneDrive or something like that? And by the way, the product works better. And then all of a sudden, that file sync and share, the whole component of that, not only becomes a file sync and share part, but it becomes a branding and a marketing component of their overall strategy. So I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, and I'll take that so far as to well say, Bernard, you and I have spoken about this, and as it relates to you, keeping the business that you got today and getting new business as well, it's these types of client interactions and client support through these tools that I think bring some of those folks back and keep some of those referrals coming in. But just want to make sure I'm not putting words in your mouth. Do you agree, Bernard?
Exactly, yes.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about BDR. And the thing with BDR up to this point is, it's been an evolution. We've talked about, we've used that word a lot today. I think BDR has really been only around since the middle of the aughts-ish in that capacity. Maybe a little earlier, depending upon what version you were using. But the traditional appliance-based, cloud-supported BDR, it's come a long way. But even still today, there's some solutions out there that have a pretty significant sense of unreliability. There's hardware failures that you have to be concerned with, and that's not even just at the server level that you're trying to back up, but even the hardware that you're trying to back up to. Software complexities make things a little bit more like, are you really managing things in the fashion that you're supposed to? And then, of course, BDR up to this point has really been a chain-based solution. But at the same time, there's also a labor intensity. When it comes down to installation, when you're dealing with complex recoveries, and you have this level of ongoing maintenance that requires a lot of hand-holding of the solution itself, just to make sure that you're meeting the SLAs that you're telling your clients that you're going to meet. So between unreliability, labor intensity, there's also the issue of speed. And a lot of the solutions today, while they've been okay, they've been slow. And that slowness comes from, again, the hardware supporting it, maybe, spinning hard drives. There's also dealing with, what type of class of storage are you dealing with? Is this just something that's traditionally, your normal backup? Is it something that's archival class? Is this something that's, again, going to meet the demands of your clients and getting them the data when they actually need it? Lastly, the expense that comes with legacy BDR solutions kind of overlays a lot of what we've already talked about, but there's overall cost, right? It's not just the concern of picking a solution. You've got to make sure that you can afford the hardware, that your technicians are able to manage it in an efficient fashion, that you don't have to constantly be going out to your clients to reseed on site. It's really all about the expense. Is really all about not only that piece of hardware you're buying or your cost of monthly licensing, but how much is it costing you to manage those solutions within your practice. And Bernard, a lot about this as it relates to Replabit. And can you talk to us maybe a little bit about Replabit and how you've solved some of the challenges that I've just hit on?
Yeah, so my introduction to Replabit was actually generated because I was an Acronis partner, and I was a big SonicWall CDP partner as well. So I used a lot of those devices. And one day SonicWall came in and said, "We're out of the CDP business. We're getting out of all that kind of stuff." And I had a bunch of these appliances around, and I said, "Hey, listen, they're going to be sunsetting all this stuff. We got to find something to help our clients with disaster recovery and backup." And as I looked around, I discovered Replabit. So once again, doing my due diligence, I decided to go ahead and take this product and see what it could do and what it couldn't do. So I've done everything from build my own appliance and put the software on it and see how it worked, to getting an appliance from eFolder and see how those work. I've used eFolder's vault. I've also have my own private vault. So that way I can test things and I can do things all kinds of different ways. And what I found is, I go back to what I said at the beginning, a product just simply has to work. I mean, if you're in the IT world, the product has to work. And everybody that's sitting on this call can appreciate what I'm going to say, in that at the end of the day, your customer says, IT's got it. I know the world may be crashing in, but somehow, some way, they'll get the data or they've got it. And sometimes in the world of ransomware and all the other hacking things that we're experiencing now, you got to look your client in the eye and say, "You made a bad decision, and no, I don't have it," and we're in deep trouble. So Replabit, I can tell you from my own personal experience and stress level, has managed the "you got it" side of that equation. Because as a person that's managing networks and infrastructure for clients, my stress level has gone down considerably, knowing that through Replabit, I have total virtualization of every appliance that sits or every server that sits out there in my client sites. And if I have to get it, I can get it, and I can get it quickly. So with Replabit, you can do full virtualization and booting of a virtual machine of your subject system. You can do file recovery. You can do just about whatever you want. And of course, as Robert said, you can replicate off-site to your own private vault or to the eFolder vaults. And that creates a tremendous amount of security for me as someone that has got to look these customers in the eye and say, "Hey, listen, I know your client your employee may have clicked on a bad link in an email and it's caused a little bit of heartburn, or they've gone somewhere on the web that they shouldn't have gone, but I think we got this and you're going to be in good shape." So that's kind of how I got into Replabit, and the appliances have been great. I can tell you, support obviously means a lot when you're an IT company, and the solution works, the support's great. But in the end, I'm very, very happy with the product, and it's very efficient. And by the way, it uses all of the native Microsoft tools to get the job done. So you don't have a lot of things that got to lay on top of something and make sure that it interfaces and works correctly. It just works.
And, thank you very much for those kind words. But, I think the fact of the matter is that it's, one of the things that I feel confident about Replabit and all of our solutions for that matter is the ability to work when they need to. And Bernard, I think that, you've had a few instances over the years that you've had to, kind of manage and use Replabit for what it's worth. But I think just recently you've mentioned you have quite a few law firms for clients. You had something just recently happen that even put kind of that slowness to the test, or the quickness to the test, making sure that it wasn't too slow. Can you tell us a little bit about that user interface, if you will?
Sure. What we had a case where a client was actually working furiously to hit a 5 o'clock filing deadline for court proceedings, and about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the employee's workstation went up. And it had a bunch of things that they had on it, and they were in full-blown panic having to have this stuff filed by 5 o'clock. And they called me, and I was out at another client, but managed to connect to them. And what we ended up doing was we ended up booting that subject machine. We booted a virtual machine of that, booted it up, got all the data, got everything up, and they still had a few minutes to spare to get all the documents they needed in file. And then in the meantime, they actually worked on that bootable VM while we addressed the issues with the workstation, and then got them back up and running very, very quickly shortly thereafter. But the big key is the client got the work out, and that worked phenomenally. And that was all within literally under 2 hours. So it was nice. It was a great testimonial from my client. It was a great testimonial to the product. To, at some point, you got to make sure this stuff works. By the way, one of the things that these things do is when you set the appliance up, unlike a fire extinguisher, where your fire extinguisher vendor goes into your office building every so often and they test that fire extinguisher to actually make sure it works. The appliances with eFolder and Replabit, they boot themselves up on a regular schedule, and they basically tell the customer, hey, yeah, I work. I come up, I work, and then they take themselves back down. So when you do get in a break glass, grab fire extinguisher panic mode, you know that that's not going to work. You're not going to say, hey, let's see if this disaster recovery appliance really works the first time we really, really, really have to have it. It does work.
Yep. And, I'll say that not only do those appliances, kind of virtualize and test themselves and test the infrastructure that they're protecting, you see there in the bottom left piece, the little graphic, the little puzzle piece, Replabit really comes in 4 pieces. And that appliance and cloud management portal are those 2 key pieces where we talk about the self-virtualization. And within the management portal, your technicians at your MSP are able to see visual confirmations that the appliances are working that they're supposed to, or in some instances see visual confirmations that they're not, and get alerts. And those things are also managed through most of the PSAs. We have very strong ConnectWise integrations, and those things are able to kind of work back and forth and let you manage the issues, if you see any, in a very efficient fashion. So again, a lot of great strengths in that solution. I'll also say we got a question in from Paul, who was asking about the vaulting that we see here, and Bernard's comment about vaulting to the eFolder cloud or to their own cloud. And do we have to choose which one? And the answer is actually no. You're able to vault to both our cloud and your own private cloud and do so simultaneously without any additional cost. So we want to make this, again, a very customizable solution to fit not only what your clients need, but the way that you want to protect and run your business. So it's a great solution. And this brings us pretty much to the end of today's call. And hopefully, especially as we were talking about Replabit, it really ties in nicely. If you go to yes, sir.
Let me throw one other thing in here that your questionnaire may be interested to know, that in the event that there's catastrophic failure at the local site level, eFolder also gives them the ability to boot that server across the internet. So if you're vaulted with eFolder and they need to get that thing up and running and connect it back to your office because something happened, there was a flood, a hurricane, whatever, and you get that back, you can boot that and bring that server back across the internet.
Excellent point. Thank you, Bernard. That's something that it's a function and a feature that I don't think can be underemphasized. So, and speaking of emphasizing, I want to emphasize the fact that, again, we've been talking about the tools around data protection to help make you successful. And specifically as it relates to the business continuity side, we talked about Replabit today. As I mentioned earlier, we actually have 2 solutions under this umbrella. Along with Replabit, we have Business Recovery Cloud. And if you demo either of those two solutions between now and the middle part of November, we're going to put you into a drawing to win a BMW 3 Series. It's not really any, we've got terms and conditions that you'll find on the website. Again, AxianEfolder.com is where you can go and just register for a demo of one of those two solutions, and just sit down with our team, and we'll walk you through either Replabit or BRC or both if you have, again, clients that maybe have needs on both sides of the coin for both on-site virtualization or that virtual office that BRC brings to the table. We really focus on, our solutions being flexible and, again, configuring the way that your clients need them. I think that's, a lot of what Bernard is saying as it relates to meeting your clients' demands and making sure they want to stay with you and even refer business to you is being flexible with them and providing them what they need. Well, we want to do the same thing at Axian eFolder and provide you options as it relates to how you're protecting your data. We want to also do so with reliability. Bernard, I think you mentioned you have a lot of confidence in our solution, and that's really all I need to say at that point, because when our partners can sleep well at night, that means we're doing something right, and we get a lot of that feedback. So I appreciate you, Bernard, being able to sit with us today and talk a little bit about that. And then lastly, from a manageability perspective, our solutions are built for the IT solutions provider. We're built with the MSP in mind. We have single panes of glass. We have ways that you can manage your entire customer base in one portal. We have the functions that, as I mentioned earlier, that integrate with the PSAs and the RMMs that you're working with. So it's something that we want to make sure that you understand is on the top of our mind, but also if you needed a little bit more incentive, give you an opportunity to win a really nice card just by simply meeting with some of our team and going through those solutions. We've actually got one question come in. It says, for everyone who's a member of some of our partnership groups, we've got a member of the 20 on the line with us. Thank you so much for joining us, John. And absolutely, if you go through, if you're not purchasing or if you're not working with one of the solutions today, obviously Bernard's working with Replabit, but maybe he has some interest in BRC, and if he goes and sits down with Sam McIntyre and goes through that demo, yes, you will be entered for an opportunity to win that BMW. So again, AxianEfolder.com. We try to make it as simple as possible, even though it's a bit of a mouthful. But yeah, go there, fill out the form, and we'll be in touch with you soon. As well, if you've got any questions and follow-up, there's my email address at the bottom of the screen. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. Happy to help address any questions you may have, or as the instance earlier, maybe get you in contact with the folks that may have those answers. But Bernard, before we close up, any last thoughts from you, sir?
No, I just want to say that, like I said, anybody that's on this call that's an IT person is getting bombarded with new technology. I would just suggest that you dumb this down into your core components of what you're going to help your customers strategically do to grow or manage their business. And these products for file sharing and disaster recovery are just super. They just work. And if anybody has any questions, like I say, I would encourage you to fire Robert front lines all day long. I'll be happy to get back with any specific questions there, and Robert can get back to you. But the products just work, and that's what's important when you're on the IT side.
Thank you very much, Bernard. And a very, very big thank you for your time. I really appreciate you jumping on the phone with us. And for everyone who's on the line, thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your very busy days. Really appreciate it. And hopefully you're walking away with something. As a reminder, we will send a follow-up note with some of the content from today's call, along with a link to AxianEfolder.com, so you too can register for a demo and have your hat thrown into a ring for that BMW. So again, I'll bid you all a fair adieu, and look forward to talking to you next time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Have a great one, Bernard.
Bye-bye.